Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and we are back with retro reviews, continuing our review series on the Rocky films tonight with a very handy header, Rocky 2. So last week's was our first episode of retro reviews, and this is the opportunity where we can go back to these bigger franchises, or not even franchises, maybe just older films in general, and talk about them. We have no films coming out at the movie theaters at the moment, at the cinemas. So it's a perfect time as any to look back at some of these older films and have a discussion on them. So we mentioned this last time. Rocky is one of the biggest franchises that we love that we've never talked about for whatever reason on the channel. And we are addressing that. We're almost at the fun ones. We're almost at the middle few. But no, we're here today to talk about Rocky 2. And we have Henrik and we have Carl in the chat ready to go. So it should be a good conversation. But before we get into that, we will do the socials very quickly and then we'll move into the review.
Absolutely, guys. So we're a little bit late tonight, so thanks for those that were waiting for us to go live. There's some technical issues, but the main thing is, obviously, as Chris said, we're doing franchise not speaking of before. These have got big fan base, so the best thing to do is to help us get more people in to watch these, is to like, comment, and share. It kind of goes without saying. It's all about those weird YouTube algorithms. So if you do that, that helps us go a long way. And of course, if you're watching this, you've never seen us before, do hit that subscribe button. If you do like our content, we've got some really cool stuff. We've had a couple of Battle of the Brackets, our original show. We have, obviously, Mandalorian reviews happening now as we speak every Friday. So there is one new thing, I guess we can say. And tomorrow evening, we're going to give you a very special tease. We are doing a video game discussion, which we've never done before on the channel because, unless you watch gaming, savvy. Because the thing with this is that there's 2 new consoles out this week. So we're going to do a special video on on games we want to see turned into films. So we're putting a neat spin on what we do. Gives us all a chance to talk about something new. So that's tomorrow night. That's going to be a really fun one. There's been a lot of prep going into that, so I hope you guys check it out. Hope you also got your pre-orders. But again, best way to find out what we're doing, when we're doing it, is always on social media. So Facebook, Cinema Savvy, and Twitter at cinema_savvy. And we've got links to TeePublic in the description below. We finally have the new logo on there as well. There's been delays getting that uploaded, but it's fine up there for people that do like our new logo. You can see it at the bottom of the screen over there. It doesn't have Sylvester Stallone punching Apollo Creed, though. That's a very different T-shirt.
I think we might get sued if we did that T-shirt. Maybe Sylvester Stallone's got some kind of trademark on that deal, I'm afraid. But no, I feel almost outdated with my shirt now. I feel like I might need to go and pick up one of the new ones. But we're having a lot of praise already for the thumbnail tonight, George. So this is all you. Carl and Henrik are loving the thumbnail. They're great fun to do. I was sort of like creative consultant, but George, this was all you. You're our resident thumbnail maker, and I know you've been on it today as well for the stuff tomorrow.
I've been training, but this is on Chris, the banner. We had the one from last week, which I loved, and then we just kind of went, let's just make it the right background for each Rocky film. We'll keep the logo at the bottom, but this was all up to Chris's making. He was helping me. I've never studied the Rocky posters because we had a great discussion off air. Every edition of Rocky, whether it's Blu-ray, DVD, is just different, like, covers. It's different posters. It's things I've not been seen before. That's its own conversation. But yeah, it's been really weird to actually see the real life theatrical Rocky posters, because obviously I've never seen them because I wasn't born, and they're not really, except the original, they're not really posters that people flash around or you see at events. So that's a cool little bit behind the scenes. However, let's talk Rocky 2. I'm going to leave this with your head in, because obviously we spoke last time about history of the series, our thoughts going to Rocky 1. I can't really repeat the same thing. Obviously, I'm just going to say to people at home that I watched Rocky 1 through to 5 for the first time in my teen years, as a lot of people did, and it was going through them all like a TV series. There wasn't time to stop to wait for the next one. They were just all watched in it was probably a half term or something back then. So I don't really have that major memory. However, I will say this is the Rocky film. Maybe this and Rocky 5 I've seen the least. I think I've only seen this twice before last night. Maybe even once. I couldn't give you the definitive answer. Obviously, there's been so many clips. The chicken, the final fight. You know, you see the clips many times, but the whole film itself, this is one I probably have seen the least. So it was really fun to go back and revisit it.
Yeah, no, same for me as well. Like Rocky 1 is a classic. Obviously, watch our previous review for that one for the in-depth discussion on it. But 2 isn't bad at all. Like I love Rocky 2 right off the bat before we get into it. But 3 and 4 are an entity unto themselves. So it's always Rocky 1, that sets the stage. And then 2's kind of that weird middle one. And it's like, okay, now we're on to Rocky 3. Now we're on to Hulk Hogan and Thunder Lips and Clubber Lang and the Super Russian in Rocky 4. So it's always that one that kind of gets overlooked. But there's a lot of great stuff in this one. In terms of like my history on watching this one, it would have just been a logical progression after watching the first Rocky. I mentioned that I was really late to watching the first Rocky film. I think I probably watched it on TV one night, and usually whenever they play one Rocky film, they tend to play them all over the course of a week or a couple of weeks. So chances are I probably watched this one on TV as well. I can't really remember, but I know that it was maybe after watching Rocky 3 on the television where I bought my DVD box set and then probably watched the rest at my own leisure after that point. But Rocky 1 to 5 are played on the TV all the time. They tend to go through them in some kind of like marathon screening. But yeah, so that's sort of my history of Rocky 2. I think we're going to have that with all of them, really, aren't we? So from here on in, probably just we watch them being, yeah, exactly. Oh, Balboa.
A good story for Balboa, and that's for the wrong reasons. It shouldn't be a good story, but it is.
Yeah, you've done like some weird machete order with the Rocky films, unbeknownst to you, haven't you? But yeah, so first and foremost with this one is I didn't realize how many of the Rocky films Sylvester Stallone actually directed. So this was the first one where he got in the director's chair. For whatever reason, John G. Alvidson couldn't direct this one. I think he was working on Saturday Night Fever. He was in pre-production for that film, which is a great movie, which hopefully maybe we'll get to review that one day on Retro Reviews. Who knows? So he couldn't direct this film, and Sylvester Stallone was really lobbying for himself, as he did to star in the first Rocky film. With this one, he was lobbying to direct it. Before this point, I think he'd only directed one other thing, if I can find that really quickly, what he directed. Paradise Alley, a drama, Paradise Alley, but the studios were really apprehensive. This director who's only done one thing, taking on a big franchise, because Rocky was a massive film. It was a huge success, so they were probably a bit more lenient on him this time. And once again, his agents and his producers really pushed for him to direct it. And here we are. And then you look, and he directed 2, 3, 4, and Balboa. Like, of the main franchise, like, he directed more than half of them, which often gets overlooked, I think. There is definitely a change, I think, from the direction to the first one to the second one, but not a massive one. It's still very much in that same tone. It came out, oh God, how many years after the first one was it? Was it 3 years?
3 years, I think. 79.
This was 79. The first one was, I think the first one was 76. So yeah, a good few years afterwards. But what I think the strengths of this one is continuing the characters in a believable way. The things that it does with, especially with Rocky and Adrian, and even some aspects of Apollo Creed. And we'll get more into the characters in a minute. But just right off the bat, I think that it is different. It's not quite as polished as the first Rocky film, and I don't think anything is going to be that, because we talked about that. The first Rocky film can be viewed as a standalone entity. Like, it does have a beginning, middle, and end to that. Ain't going to be no rematch. I said this last week, and then 3 years later we get one. Despite that fact, it doesn't feel like a cash grab. It does feel like it's trying to take these characters and further them on in their story, as they get wealthy, as they go through the motions of sports and family life, work life, and I think that's the strengths of this one, to be honest.
Yeah, you mentioned the life. I'm going to kind of merge our next point together. So I was blown away at how much this film does life. This film. So if let's just take a character arc, right, of Adrian, maybe across the entire Rocky franchise. She gets to Rocky. They get engaged. They get married. She's pregnant. She goes into a coma. She gives birth. She dies. 5 of those 7 things happen in the first hour of Rocky 2. I was surprised at how much the pace went, and I quite liked it, because I thought, oh god, it's a bit quick, but it's believable when you go back to watching Rocky 1. Stallone feels like the kind of guy that would propose very quick, that would get engaged very quick, and they've still got the great scenes. They've still got the chemistry with one another. It's so much is coming at you so quick, because ultimately, I think what I like about this is that it doesn't need to be a slow burner, because we all know we're getting the rematch. And I think this is why I have a different sort of interpretation of this, that, you can't have him progressing life saying, I'm going to be doing this job for like an hour and a half, because we know for the last 15 minutes, you're going to be in that ring, because you're not going to commission Rocky 2 without him getting that rematch. You're not just going to do a drama about him working and not fighting. So it's quite not smart in that sense, but I feel it's quite honest with itself, that it knows it needs to speed up. It knows it needs to get to that point in time. Great of having time pass is seeing sort of their relationship not deteriorate, but his attitude, spending the money too quickly, struggling for work, seeing all that stuff, I think builds up to the final sort of 10-15 minutes. It might not be as well, I'm going to say as well written or directed as the first one, because that is obviously, as we discussed, like a perfect film, but I think this does everything it has to do to get you to that final point. I think if he didn't have some of those issues, some of those stakes of him being at home, the slow build up, you mentioned Apollo Creed's relationship with him. I love the fact that I mean, it's not a nice thing, but getting all the hate mail. Like we look at 2020, this modern era of social media, all the abuse people get, and people forget back then they have pens and paper and they send it to them. And it was just, it made me laugh. It's like, this one's from London. She says, "I hope you die," or something like that. And I just kind of sat there.
That'd be on Twitter, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and then, you know, the conspiracy theory is like, oh, they're saying I threw the fight to win it at the last minute because he's a nobody. And I loved the Apollo stuff because it is over the top, it is insane, but you get that beautiful scene that's like 10 seconds long where he just says to him, "Did you give it your all?" And he says, "Yeah." And I think that's why I like Apollo Creed, because I don't think if you have that scene, he would be quite detestable. But because you know he gave it his all, it's that sort of inner battle with himself. And that's what his trainers get at, which I loved as well. So everything of Apollo Creed is great. We don't get too much of him, but we get the right amount of him. I know I've kind of waffled on to a couple more points, but that's a really big draw. And again, to get you to the final 10 minutes, you need all the other stuff.
Yeah, no, we may as well talk about Apollo Creed now. Just before we do, though, I do want to address Daniel's question there. Is it the first time you guys have seen the Rocky movies? I've seen them more times than I care to tell. But George, how many times? You say this one in particular, you've may have only seen a few times.
I think I've only seen outright binge the series once in a sitting. However, I've seen Rocky 1 multiple times, 4 multiple times, and Balboa a couple of times. So I'm not new to it in that sense. However, it's been the first time I've sat down and done these properly in maybe 10 years now. God, that was a weird throwback to school. So it's really fun to go back to, because some of these feel like a new watch, whereas some of them I know what I'm coming in for. So it's one of those. It's a bit of both, isn't it, I guess, ultimately.
Yeah, no, but going back to your point, sorry, about Apollo Creed, that was one of my positives with the first one, in that it would have been, I think I mentioned this last week even, it would be so easy to demonize the character of Apollo Creed and just make him like a two-dimensional bad guy. Obviously, you're rooting for Rocky, he's the main protagonist, but you don't hate Apollo Creed in the first one. He is just that larger-than-life Muhammad Ali caricature showman, and that's, you get exactly more of that in this one as well. But although he says there ain't going to be no rematch, you can understand the reasons why he would want one, for his own integrity, for his own sense of self, and the fact that he's getting loads of hate mail. And we don't get loads of his home life. It does definitely keep the focus on Rocky again, which I always think is the most important thing, but we get enough of him and we can see how it's wearing on him. And we know deep down that he did give his all in the first one, but he wants to clear his own name. And any sportsman, especially heavyweight champion of the world, would want to do that. So again, love how they advance his character, and that's totally believable for him. And it doesn't feel, this is why I love Rocky 2, because it doesn't feel like a cash grab, like, oh, we're doing exactly the same thing again. Although they ultimately kind of are, it's the story that the characters go on. So I love what they do with Apollo. But again, the walk away in this is the life of Rocky and all the hardships he goes through, because that really is what the Rocky franchise is. It's about hardships. It's about losing people. And yeah, you said that no other franchise does life better than Rocky does it, and especially not this one. All the stuff with Adrian, and you get all the heartstring moments. And I even said, like, even this one, I get a bit misty in some parts as well, you know, like when they get married. I love how low-key it is as well. And it actually brings this up. I know we're not going to talk about the Creed films, but when we get to Creed 2 and Adonis proposes to Bianca, he even asks Rocky, like, what did you say when you asked Adrian, when you proposed to Adrian? He says, like, oh, I said, like, I hope you wouldn't mind marrying me very much. It's so understated and it's so human, and that's why I love the Rocky films. I know they do kind of, after this one, they go a bit more cartoony, but inherently its heart's always in the right place. There are elements, though, of Rocky in this film where I do think he is a bit of I don't want to say a bit of an asshole, but I think that if you do come from a not very well-off family, or you're struggling, when you are suddenly given all this money from the fight that he got in the first film, you probably would want to blow it all on fancy clothes, fast cars, and everything. And we have that whole montage where shady people are coming up to him and say, like, oh, sign this is a great deal, because they just want a bit of this. So even though he's about to, start a family and everything like that, he isn't very responsible with his money, and he's not really. Adrian's kind of going along with it, but you can sense from how she plays it that she has her reservations there. So he is. I won't say he's unlikable in this film because Rocky is very likable, but there's always that element of like, don't just when you stop and think about what you're blowing all your money on, but then you put yourself in that situation. You probably would do that if you were suddenly given all these millions or thousands or whatever it would have been in those days.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think it's such a natural reaction. You go back to the first film, and when he's called a bum, he's working at the docks. He's had this difficult life, and it's been hard enough to get Adrian to go out with him, and then he gets this, and you're absolutely perfect. It is that situation. Think of sportsmen as well, like not just modern day ones, but especially sort of boxing, UFC, where they get their big moment. Example again, the guy that knocked out Anthony Joshua. Yeah, he's a boxer. He had a reputation. He didn't have that reputation. And overnight, everything for him. And then he lost the rematch. And people speak about him for that fight. They don't speak about him for other things. Now, there might be some boxing fans fuming that I've said that. But that's the way certainly combat sports go. I know that's a very weird phrase. Like UFC, everyone has their moment. And obviously, some of them last a lot longer than others. Don't get me wrong. That is completely true. Same with football. Someone will score a wonder goal, and then you won't hear from them again. But you'll always remember that one goal they scored at the World Cup. Something like that. So it feels real that he would blow it. You would get the contracts coming for you saying, sign this, represent us. And that's what I loved with this, is that when he goes to do all the advertising stuff, it is that come down he's reading, he can't read the words. You feel bad for him because they put him in a cage and they're all mocking him. And
that's one of my favorite scenes, though, with that like really flamboyantly camp director. And he's like, cut. Like, I love that scene. He's like, when a real man sweats. And I think we've lost George.
I'm back. Sorry, I'm back. The internet drops.
I was just saying, I love that the commercial deal that he has with like the really flamboyant director, the really stereotypical like flailing his arms around director when things aren't going right on set, and when a real man sweats, and he's dressed like. I love that scene. I think it's brilliant. Yeah, it's one of my favorite scenes if I'm out there.
Sports people do it, and that's the thing. Look at, I'm going to bring Anthony Joshua again. There's, for you guys in the UK, there's this abysmal is it Lynx advert where they play the Dumb and Dumber opening song, and it's forever Dumber. And these people have to do stuff like that. You get it in all sports. You get it in actors doing ridiculous adverts. You get it everywhere, and it, I think, would come into that life, because if you just had this guy that just does boxing, we don't get anything else but boxing, I don't think you'd have, again, what we spoke about in the first one. You don't get those moments, the personality, and we're seeing the bad decisions he's making, because if a character can do nothing but perfect things, to me, that lessens him as a character. I'd rather see him make mistakes and learn from them, feel what's right for him, because at the end of the day, it brings it back to that sort of family thing where he's embarrassed that Adrian is pregnant and has to work. And obviously, then you get Paulie in the same thing, who we don't get a lot of Paulie in this film.
No, I was surprised going back to this, actually. I thought he was in this more.
Yeah, lost a lot of weight, and I know they make a comment about that, but he's got still a couple of great moments. Certainly the press conference, I laughed a bit, and obviously he's still terrorizing Adrian. Sends her into early labor ultimately. But aside from that, I think it did the right things to progress again into that, because we all know the rematch is coming. Let's not make it an hour long and show us like 15 rounds at 3 minutes each, because some films probably would, some films probably have. But I think it did it at the right pacing. To go back and to the opening scene and show the ending of Rocky 1 was perfect, because I was already misty-eyed at that, because I said before, it's the final scene of Adrian. Then you get all the rest, and obviously you do get that later on, which you can go into properly then. But I think all this, the mistakes he makes, is a key part of this. And I think that's why this worked better in my head than I remember it. I think as a teenager, it probably wasn't, not that it wasn't fun, but at that age, you want the fighting. You don't care about the drama. You want the action. Whereas now it's I want the drama to enhance those action set pieces, to enhance the story. And again, it's so amazing to look back on this so many years later. And I didn't think we'd get that, because obviously this is the thing. This is still one of the dramas. We're not in that terrain yet, as you said, 3 and 4. We're not there yet. We're close.
Almost. Next week we are. Next week.
And there's little tidbits pointing it here and there, but some things I'm going to bring up. I'm not going to bring up all the comments, Henok, but we have Henok spewing nothing but Rocky facts all over the chat. And I was going to go to the training montage, not to not to go into it too much, but more so the running bit, because I love that theme. Everyone loves the theme. You know, the run starts, you're pumped, and you get like 800 kids start following him, and I've always hated that. I think that's one of the reasons why I've always been put off using like Rocky 2 gifts, because I just like seeing him run. I know that sounds really strange, like someone's thinking like Hayden Christensen lightsaber moment here. But Henok mentioned that around 8 school kids were used, and that's true. I did a little bit of reading on this last night, and we were chatting as well, and it was really cool to read into it. So it's things like that that, you know, not just reflecting Rocky, but if we can even go into it further and look at Stallone. This is a guy that was homeless before Rocky 1. You know, he had to sell his dog to essentially for the dog to be able to live because he couldn't afford it. And I think there's probably career sort of equals with Rocky and Stallone, because I'm sure Stallone may have had those moments where he spent all this money. Obviously, we don't know he did. He's been very successful. He's able to direct this. But I always feel that Rocky's sort of semi-autobiographical from Stallone, that he takes parts of his life and he puts them into this character, so we don't think of it as him. And that's a very strange thing to say, obviously, 40 years plus down the line. But certainly with this one, I felt there's some comparison that, you know, Rocky won Best Film at the Oscars. He was nominated for Best Actor. He would have gone from nothing to everything at the click of a finger. And I think Rocky probably deals with that really well. And I wonder if some of his life's writing goes into those scenes, because it does go so quick, but it feels real at the same time.
Yeah, I'm sure it does, and I think that Rocky, I mean, it made Sylvester Stallone, it put him on the map. So I do think that the franchise overall is very near and dear to his heart. He's always stayed with it true, even with his involvement in the Creed films. So I think that he definitely has put a lot of himself into it, both making the films, starring in them, but yes, definitely probably bringing in a lot of his life, certainly more towards those earlier ones, and maybe even elements in his later life now, when we get into sort of like Balboa territory. There's definitely probably more of that shift. Now he's older, he can put that new perspective on the character. So yeah, wow, Henok is just we're going to get onto Henok's facts about the final fight, because actually I didn't know about that, where he talked about the rivalry. We will get to those comments, believe me. I want to talk about Adrian as well in this one, because that is where the real heart and the soul of it is, with the whole complications with pregnancy, and it takes up a good portion of the screen time as well. But I think it's necessary, because that is where the heart and soul of the Rocky franchise is to me, is with that relationship with Adrian. And, we see them get married in this one, and it's all beautifully well done. And one thing that I found out about is, because she's not actually present in the final fight like she was in the first one, I found out she was actually working on another film around about this time. So it's a drama called Old Boyfriends, which I'm not going to lie, I've never heard of until I read about it. And that is why she's sat at home watching the fight on TV. And they filmed that very, very late into the shoot. And I think that Rocky 1 had a lot of those happy accidents as well, where certain things, there may have been some flubs that were made, or some things weren't planned, but ultimately they had to run with it. And then we see them in the final film and it works for the better. I mentioned the ice rink last time was one of those incidences, and where they messed up the color of the trunks on the posters. There's a line in this as well referring to the boxing robe, where he says, "This one's much better than the last one. Do you remember how baggy the first one was last time?" And that's because they messed up his sizing on the first Rocky film. But yeah, so it's nice that they can think on their feet like that. And it just go into the final fight now really quickly with the information. The whole concept of him changing stances and switching from a southpaw to fighting on the other side, I thought that just made sense for the script and was a really cool twist that they brought to that final fight, and a new hurdle that Rocky had to overcome. Apparently that was because Rocky tore his pectoral. He was challenging, oh God, what's his name? Franco Columbo, I think his name is, to a bench press contest. Never challenge a professional powerlifter to a bench press contest ever. Ended up tearing his pec, and that's why he had to switch sides. So not knowing that, I think that's just like a really cool nugget of information, but it just works. It's seamless in the film. You just think, yeah, that's naturally where the story has to go. It's another stake for the final fight. It's an interesting spin on that final round, a tactic that Rocky has to overpower Creed that he's not aware of. So a lot of those happy accidents, and I'll be actually really interested to see if there's any of those accidents in Rocky 3 or 4, because maybe it's only some of these earlier ones before they got the production down for them. But I don't know. I love reading about that stuff. And Henok's probably got hundreds, more nuggets of information which you can share with us. Who knew that Hennick was like the resident Rocky fan of the world? Maybe, like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I saw that last night as well. It adds a dynamic. It's what you said. It's a happy accident. There's things that you look at films that go wrong. You know, oh, we've had this casting issue. We've had this happen on set, and they'll be delayed months at a time. But certainly, maybe obviously it's the difference of production these days. You know, back then it was probably a bit looser. You look at Star Wars, the original, same era. You can afford to have many abysmal mistakes on a set, but it's what you can do with it and how you can address those issues and turn it into something else. And that Southpaw thing, you would never know that wasn't written. I had no idea until afterwards. I started looking at it, and I was like, it is insane that was obviously done off a bench press competition. I can picture it. I can picture him challenging someone. It seems like the sort of thing they'd all do back then, and it not going well. But to then, like, rather than delay filming, just change it. You know, that to me was a really big thing. That he wanted this film out. He could have he probably had the power to delay it, and he didn't. And it's what you mentioned, the Adrian thing as well. That the scene of her being at home feels natural. It doesn't feel like, oh, we can't get her into the set, so we'll send her back there. It worked out, I think, better. I know it's a passed-away line that the doctor said I can't go. That's a shame. But by having Paulie with her as well, you know, whether he was also at some other film, we don't know. But I think to have those two, it just feels natural. It progresses it, and then you obviously get the Adrian bit at the end, which cements one of the most iconic, probably, lines in cinema.
I always kept thinking that was the ending of the first one, because I tend to quote the ending of this one more. Yo, Adrian, I did it. And for some reason in my head, I always chalk that up to the first Rocky film. Yeah, they are very similar endings, though, aren't they? So maybe that's why I switched them. But I'd say out of the two endings, I love them both. I probably like this one a little bit more than Rocky 1 in terms of that final speech, that final moment there.
I'm the opposite, and I didn't think I would be.
Okay.
So I say opposite. It's not a polar opposite. They're like neck and neck still. The first one, I think, because he doesn't win. I think because we knew he's going to win, and obviously it's the moments where Paulie, you know, not that he needs a redemption or anything. It's those bits where he's distracting the cop. He can let her into the ring.
Yeah.
It's the really little things like that I loved. Obviously, I love the ending of 2 as well. As someone that obviously grew up of wrestling as well, the Mick Foley winning the world championship that should never have happened. He does a Yoji and I did it. He copied the exact thing. That's a classic in itself. And there's a reason why Rocky has that pop culture phenomenon. And, you know, going off the endings again, it's a silly comparison because they're both phenomenal endings in their own right. And it's a kind of polite mirror. I think if she was there as well, it would have been way too much like the first one. I think by her being at home with the kid, it adds a very different dynamic to it, if that makes sense. But the ending piece is just the best way to do it. So it leaves you on that high, and it leaves you prepped up, ready for the third one. Because obviously we know that does come next, and now he is the champion. And not to get into a Creed comparison, but obviously what everyone spoke about Creed in the past, where Creed kind of merged the first 4 Rocky films into 2.
Yeah.
And I think it does it in a very good way. You get those small moments throughout the you know, pull things, do things differently, and it has that moment because we've seen it in the Rocky films. We know Stallone would like to go back to it and have his new spin on it, which I think is really important.
Definitely. We're getting a lot of comments at the moment about Rocky Balboa. Don't worry, guys, we will get to it in a few weeks. Don't worry, we're going to be bringing up all of those points. Hennick's quote in the film, Daniel's talked about it. It's going to be really good going through them all in sequence as well. So we're going to hit that right at the opportune moment for it. But let's talk about the ending. So like the final fight, and this is a problem with a sequel. You mentioned there that they couldn't get Adrian into the ring because it would have been too similar to the first film. And I completely agree with that. And I like the way that they changed it and put that spin on it for this one, even if it wasn't necessarily intentional from the production of the film. The fight itself, I will say going into it, there's probably significantly fewer stakes than the first one. With the first one, you're still wrapped up in that. It's a brand new thing. Rocky could win. He could lose. You genuinely don't know the outcome of where that's going to go. When you've got the second one, you know that Rocky's not going to lose again. You know that he can't lose again. You know right from the off that he's going to win that fight. Nevertheless, because I think that's like the problem with a sequel where you wouldn't be able to capture that same magic, that same spontaneity of that first fight. But I still think it's a very tense fight. Tenser now for the reasons that Hennick actually brought to my attention. So I'm going to scroll up some of his earlier comments.
That blew me away. I've been
He's
reading
done a few, so let me just try and find the one where he said. Here we go. So he's talking about Apollo Creed and so Sylvester Stallone and oh god, what's his name? Jesus, Carl Weathers. Thank you. That they weren't actually acting in some parts where they're trash talking each other. There's so much more trash talking in this fight as well, which is kind of a thing that increases as the films go on. Certainly in Rocky 3. That may have actually have been real. Obviously, the fight's completely choreographed ahead of time. With anything like this, there are going to be certain blows that are going to be missed, and contact is going to be made. And apparently, that's what happened, and that didn't sit too well with the actors. So when we see them going at it and getting riled up, that probably actually happened on set. I kind of like that though. That adds a really cool dimension to the fight. I love that.
Saying that because it's a weird shot, isn't it? It's kind of like not bird's eye, but it's like long shot out of the stand, and you're just seeing them pushing and shoving, and it looks real. It's like, they're just getting heated. And again, I had no knowledge that I read that. I was like, whoa, okay, that's changed that. Not that I'm going to go back and watch the fight now, but there's always stories in the past that they would let each other punch each other for real. Obviously, Creed's got the famous clip of Tony Bellew knocking out, Michael B. Jordan. So I do love that Stallone brings that realism in, but to have them angry with each other, and I'm not going to sit here and say it's method acting. You can imagine if you've choreographed these fight scenes for months, and then people start throwing real punches in there, that's going to escalate. And I think those two obviously are good friends. Like looking back, not even in character, the actors, they probably love the fact they were riled up, but it just adds that reality to it. And the fight itself is interesting because in the first film, the goal of the fight is just to survive. And Apollo Creed doesn't come across like a champion. We know he's the champion. But this is what I love in this one. You text me when you're watching. We're about 5 minutes apart. And you're like, why doesn't Rocky ever block? I just love that Apollo Creed is just going out to kill him, and it looks real. He is landing those punches. He is quicker than he is in the first one. You do your amazing Michael Caine impression of Bane, but it just feels quicker. The punches feel harder, and he comes across like a champion, and Rocky comes across like that local guy that Apollo Creed says, I'm going to prove that this was a fluke. And obviously we know where it's going to go, but it does enough to add the suspense throughout. And I think that's where it becomes believable. You get to round 15 and it's coming. What's going to happen. But it's what the trainer says, just hold out the round. You've won. You go forward, you're going to get knocked out. And it does it, but it does it in such a way that's incredible. It's not a one-shot uppercut to the deck. It's not a one quick punch to the side. It's just this brutal beatdown at the end. And I think this fight was definitely better than the first one for many of those reasons. And obviously, again, you want to talk suspense when they're both getting up at the count at the end.
That's what I was going to bring up.
And, they could have easily left, Creed down for the whole thing. But for them to be up equally and then keep having the lingering shots on either, I just love the way that Apollo drops as well. It feels real. He's so close to the end, he just can't do it. And then you get that kind of respect beginning, which we'll obviously see in the next few Rocky films, where he does shake his hand. I can't remember. He says something to him, doesn't he? But
I think he just says like "good luck," meaning he's the new heavyweight. I can't remember the line. Maybe Hennick can. But yeah, no, it is really It's overly cinematic, probably when they both fall to the ground at the same time and they're both side by side climbing up. But
the music as well.
Yeah, that's why we watch films like this. Like, I don't need the boxing to be completely realistic, and it certainly isn't when we get to 3 and 4. But we love it because of that. But it does work, and although that Rocky's probably going to make it out of it, and he's going to be the victor at the end of it, there is still some tension there, and you are still I hate saying like on the edge of your seat, but you are kind of like right there with Paulie and Adrian and sort of cheering him on. You're begging him to get up, and he does. So it's a fantastic ending. I love it. They're talking about Rocky 4. We can't talk about Rocky 4 yet.
It's so hard. Like, you don't have people. I would just love to bring everyone on, just like keep talking Rocky. It'll be like the Rocky 2 and there's going to be loads of people following us, giving us facts.
Cole did put this though, and I agree with him. He says that the one thing I can add is Rocky 1 and 2 feel like the perfect companion pieces. Yeah, they definitely do. I think that 5's kind of an odd one out here because no one likes Rocky 5. I like Rocky 5. We'll get to our Rocky 5 discussion, but 1 and 2 are so very similar. 3 and 4 are so very similar, and then I'd probably say from Balboa onwards, they've all kind of fell under like a uniform tone. They found that dramatic tone again. Five's kind of that weird one, which we'll discuss obviously in a few weeks' time. But no, if I guess we can sort of go into favorite scenes, and then we can round off with our final thing. So let me try to think. I talked about the commercial. That's definitely one of my favorite scenes. Any scene? Oh, this is what I wanted to talk about with Tony Burton, the character of Duke, Apollo's trainer. Anytime he's being a hype man to Apollo Creed, or Apollo Creed is in danger and he's just profusely sweating and he's spitting, it's like in again Rocky IV, throw the damn towel, like the gif like that everyone shares around. It's brilliant. I don't know what, I just love it. It's great. So that always puts a smile on my face.
This is the thing, because obviously he rocks up in Creed, and he's this old figure, but when you've not seen them for that amount of time, I can't wait. I know we'll have to have a discussion about something, but I can't wait to see Creed again in the future, knowing how much more importance he had compared to when I was younger and didn't see it as much. But go back to the first one. He sees Rocky. He thinks this guy needs to be paid attention to. And I sent you a really quick clip. I know you were watching anyway, but it was just when Apollo's G'ing himself up, I was like, he's getting ready to take on Gus for the Darksaber. It's just amazing. It's all about their mentalities. It's about the trainers and how they do it. Mix that very traditional, stereotypical, I'm just going to abuse you until you turn good type thing, which is nothing wrong with. But Duke's kind of like compensating him. He's like, I love you, man. And like he's proper going for it. And they work so well together. I love them. You feel like there's a friendship in there, but at the same time, you feel like Apollo could cast him aside at any moment.
Mm-hmm.
But it's about the conversation. In terms of favorite scene, I've really struggled because I think the first one stands out so much for different ways. And I'm looking at this one, and this is really strange. I love the wedding, but it's not because they get married. Because obviously Talia Shire's from The Godfather. So all I can think of is all I could think of in my head yesterday was like, oh my God, like it feels like I'm watching the final scene of The Godfather, and like someone's going around like shooting all of like Rocky's rivals while he's there like marrying her in the church, from like the Italian type thing to the fact obviously it's Coppola's sister and she was in the Godfather film. So it's not really favorite for that sense, but it was really funny. Like I don't know why it was funny. It's not, but I just
and
had
you
that
get your obligatory cameo from Frank Stallone again as the
the
fireside singer. Yeah.
I tell you who I love, and I said it in the last one. His friend, the shady guy, who actually reminds me of like 1970s Tony Stark. He's got those kind of sunglasses.
He's got the creepy, like greasy hair, the pencil tash. Like he is the sleaziest, slimiest guy that you can think of. He's not in it as much in this one. Like I knew he was in Rocky 2, but he's more of a background character, I would say, in this one. He doesn't get as many great moments as he does in the first one. But Paulie gets his job, so that's kind of where he gets worked into it. I guess I don't want to take all your favorite moments away, but I know you mentioned the press conference earlier. I forgot to mention that one. That's more so Paulie and Apollo Creed going at it. That's probably the best bit.
Again, like going back to like my wrestling roots of watching that, there's nothing better than a promo for anything. And boxing, UFC, it's all the same. It's whoever's going to promote a fight. Go back to Muhammad Ali, look at Conor McGregor, look at everyone in between. It's all about promoting, and it's just the way Apollo Creed says it. And this is why I love Carl Weathers, that everyone, I guess now we can expand it to maybe 4 things. Everyone would always look at Rocky, Predator, and Arrested Development. Now we can add in the Mandalorian, and him in the Mandalorian is basically a combination of the 3 we just mentioned. So I think any scenes we get with him is great, but I just love that scene of him just fuming at home, like his wife's just telling him to get on with it. It's just, he's desperate to read all the fan mail of abuse, and I don't know why I find that so pleasing. It's just setting them up for the villain, isn't it? And it's hard to think of a favorite scene of this, because I don't think, not to sort of say it down on it, because I had a really good time watching it, I don't think there's any better scene in this than in the first one.
That's fine.
I may be wrong. If people have other opinions, absolutely do comment them, but tracking back, I just enjoyed the whole thing. There's definitely standout moments. I love Butkus the dog, so seeing him get a bath was cute. Whenever they're in scenes, him barking in the car when they're buying the house. So anything with him in, I'm always sold on. But I just had a really fun time just going through the whole thing again, and it just continues it. So I'm struggling to pick out an outright favorite scene, because I kind of have similar thoughts on all of them. But if there is a standout to me, it's the press conference. That's the sort of character building moments where Stallone starts talking about is it like cartoons and stuff like that, and he wants to get Paulie a snow cone machine, and you can just tell Apollo Creed's fuming. He thinks he's like taking the mick, but he's not. That's genuinely what he thinks. So I love seeing the little things like that from him.
Yeah, and Daniel agrees. He says, I think my favorite scene is the press conference, like Apollo trying to make Rocky mad while Rocky starts to explain what stuff he's going to buy with the money after the match. I often wonder as well when I watch this film, because I know that Sylvester Stallone wrote the first one, but directing this one, I'm wondering if there was some improv in there. There's some moments where Rocky's just kind of going off on one, the way he talks. It feels, again, that feeling very real. I'm wondering if some of that was improv, where he was saying, I want to buy like what are the little Muppets, Big Bird and Ernie or something. It feels very improvised. But I love that line where it says, Rocky, do you have anything derogatory to say to the champ? He says, derogatory. He's great. I just love that. And then they're saying, how about you, Apollo? He's like, does it look like a damn circus to you? Like, just, yeah.
Another great line is the condominiums.
Yes, yeah. It's like, I don't use it.
It's just his mate's reaction. I've got to bring this up. We've spoken about this on the Mandalorian reviews. Rocky has an influence on the Mandalorian end credits theme. Absolutely. Yes, quick Creed thing. Obviously, Ludwig Göransson did the Creed soundtracks and does the Mandalorian. We made that point from episode 1, chapter 1. So, yeah. I think Mandalorian's come into its own a little bit more. I can differentiate better than I could a year ago. However, I'm worried about watching Creed to see if it's actually as similar to Creed as I imagined. But speaking of the music, Bill Conti again, superb.
Yeah,
one of the greatest sort of workout motivational music you can ever listen to if you're doing anything in the garden, because obviously we're in lockdown, or if you're at a gym, or if you're going for a run. That is the guy, and that is the songs to be playing.
And we get 2 montages in this film. Count them, 2.
Back.
We're coming for those montages in 4, where it's basically the entire movie feels like a music video, which is why we love it. I'm trying to think. I really want to keep this conversation going, but I'm trying to think of anything else I can think of. I think we're probably wrapping up on this one. Definitely, probably a lot more to say in Rocky 3 and 4. If I'm going to go into my final thoughts on this, I think it's a perfect sequel. I think it's a solid sequel. The way that it advances all of the characters, how it delves more into Rocky's personal life and the struggles that he goes through, it just helps, especially as you get older as well. You kind of latch onto those bits more. It's just a really enjoyable film. And what you mentioned earlier as well, how the beginning of the film starts with the final act of the first one, which is something that they continue to do all the way up until Balboa came out. Even 5 shows like the ending of 4 again. That's going to be an interesting in that 5's meant to take place right after Rocky 4. Different conversation. But I often think that it had been 3 years since the first film, and I don't know how quickly things came out on VHS back in the day. If it was like an immediate thing, if it was a year, because chances are if people hadn't have seen that first Rocky film until 3 years before, they would need a recap. They would need a reminder of what actually happened at the ending of Rocky 1. But it does help to sort of like, and when I do go through a Rocky marathon, because they always start with that bookended chapter, it does make watching through them really, really easily. I love this film. Not as good as the first one, but it was never going to be anyway. But in terms of sequels and best sequels out there, I definitely think Rocky 2 is a contender for one of those. It's great.
Yeah, I just had to follow a quick Google to see when VHS first came out. 77. But I know a lot of films weren't available till the early 80s. So yeah, that's a really good point. I'd love to look into that a little bit more. In terms of I'm kind of echoing your thoughts. As far as the sequel goes, I think it's a great sequel. But to be the sequel to the original, I think is more important. I think it's easier for you to make better sequels when it's like a number 3, 4, or 5, because you never want to be the one directly after, because you can learn from the mistakes of the second one. I think this film does the opposite. It takes the story to where the story needs to go. It develops the characters in new ways. They went for something similar but different, but nothing too similar. Nothing, I guess, too obvious. We know he's going to be the champion, but I don't think people would have probably expected to get a story arc of him doing commercials, of him trying to work at a factory just to get a job to pay the bills. I think people would have thought, okay, sequel, he's going to be fighting, he'll get a contract, it'll be done. I think they advanced it in a really good way. And I think it did it enough for us to, I kind of said it as a kind of, not necessarily a criticism, but how quick the story goes in terms of the life events. Mm-hmm. That's really a blessing, because not pushing for next week, but that then gives you the freedom to do things in 3 and 4, 5 to a point that would have otherwise had to have had loads of time to do so. Maybe Stallone was right in this direction. He thought, I'm not going to get a Rocky 3, so I'm going to tell their story now. and that's how it came across. And I've got nothing wrong with that because it means we can have some fun in the next couple of films. Not that this one isn't fun. So that being said, it's probably the best I can round that up.
Yep.
What I'm going to say, I'm in the same boat as you. I'm loving the comments tonight. Every one of their Rocky facts. So I got a shout out to Carl for asking everyone to like it. I'm going to do that once more, not to jump into the socials now, but as you said, it's all about the algorithms. Daniel, we've not had comment on the Rocky videos before, so we're just going to say we're doing these every Tuesday at the same time, 10 p.m. GMT. I noticed you've got a Real Madrid badge, so it'll be 11 p.m. if you are based in Spain, and then it will be 2 p.m. ET and 2 p.m. PT and 5 p.m. ET, and now the American times are locked in my brain. So do all of that, like, comment, share, and subscribe. We just basically want to get as many Rocky fans in as we can, because I think we've had as much fun chatting with one another as reading the comments, Henok bringing the facts, Carl chatting with them as well, and Daniel having this new input. So from a social aspect, tonight has been great already. I know I'm kind of pushing towards the end, but like I said, don't stop commenting and try and hold off one more week. We'll have watched Rocky 3. We'll be talking about Rocky 3. Then it will be Rocky 4, 5, Balboa. So we've got a fair few to go through. But that is every Tuesday night, locked in for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I thought you were going to round it off. Yeah, no, this has been an absolute blast in the comments, and not just looking forward to these reviews and actually discussing it, because it's great going back to these Rocky films, but I'm sort of like tuning in live to check out Henek's comments. Yeah. He's blowing my mind with Rocky facts, so I'm looking forward to seeing his facts next week. Hopefully you can tune in again, Henek. It's been a blast. And yeah, once again, a big thank you to Daniel, Carl, everyone else who's tuned in tonight. This has been a blast, and hopefully we can get the same for Rocky 3, as you said, next Tuesday, 10 p.m. GMT. And yeah, it's going to be a blast. It's the one with Eye of the Tiger. It's the one we're all looking forward to. So yeah, I guess we'll end with the socials one more time. As George said, we want you to keep the conversation going as well. So do like, comment, share, subscribe, keep that conversation going. And to find more information on not just these videos, the retro reviews that we do, but all of the other reviews that we do, Mandalorian on Fridays, and that very special video we've got coming out tomorrow as well, go onto our socials. So Facebook at Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. And if you'd like to pick up any merch that we have, any t-shirts, go to the TeePublic link in the description down below. And please do that. So this is a blast. Kind of don't want to go because everyone's still commenting, but we don't want to keep you any longer. So this has been a blast. Thank you very much, guys. And we'll see you next week for Rocky 3. Take care.